Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really fascinating paradox we found in one of our sources, Notes on Fishkeeping,
Hmm.
part 160.
Hmm.
And it poses this deceptively simple question.
Hmm.
Why would a lifelong, totally dedicated fish keeper choose not to have a massive, impressive centerpiece aquarium?
It's such a great question because as soon as you read that this person has spent, and I'm quoting here, many moons for indulgence in fish keeping.
Decades, basics.
Exactly. Decades. The image that just, pops into your head is this giant wall of water. You just assume that dedication equals scale.
Absolutely. You'd think someone with that kind of history would be housing the giants of the aquarium world. We're talking like a 300-gallon tank for a huge, majestic Arowana.
Oh, yeah. Or maybe a massive school with those big red parrot cichlids, something that just commands your attention the second you walk into the room.
It's the aquatic version of collecting supercars, right?
It is, and yet this person deliberately avoids that entire path. So I think our mission for this deep dive is to get past the aesthetics and really dig into the philosophy that's driving this choice.
Okay.
Because we're looking at a pretty fundamental split in motivation. I mean, is the tank there for interior decoration, for spectacle, or is it a tool for study and breeding and just plain curiosity? The source draws a very hard line between those two worlds.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because the notes immediately set up a contrast, framing the author's approach against what they call the decorative contingent.
That's right. The source kind of quickly dismisses these individuals, usually, and I quote, with fat wallets, who see the whole setup as just a decorative accessory or a piece of furniture.
For a fancy home or a corporate office or something.
Right. It implies that the actual fish are kind of secondary to the overall look.
And this decorative approach has these huge practical implications, right? It fuels a whole business model in the aquarium industry.
It really does.
Because if the tank is just furniture, you don't treat it like a living ecosystem. You treat it like an asset that has to look perfect all the time.
Exactly. And that perfection takes a ton of consistent work that the owner they don't want to do it themselves.
Right.
And this is where the service economy comes in. These clients, they simply hire fish stores to provide regular on-site maintenance for them.
And we're not just talking about a quick water change.
Oh, no. Think about the level of detail. They're scrubbing every rock, pruning every plant to a specific look, making sure the glass is chemically perfect. It's a premium service.
Notes are very clear on the money side of this. This arrangement offers a lucrative income stream for the fish shops.
Of course.
It means the shop isn't just selling you a $10 bag of fish food. They're selling a monthly retainer fee for, what, aesthetic guardianship.
That's a great way to put it. And that guardianship comes with huge technical burdens. I mean, if you're housing those big ornamental fish we talked about.
Like those messy red parrot cichlids?
Yeah, exactly. The filtration system, the water changes you need, the bioload. It's immense. You need commercial-grade equipment, maybe even custom plumbing. And for that decorative owner, the expense is worth it because the visual impact is the entire point.
It's so interesting how that sets the stage. We see this top tier of commercial, totally hands-off fish keeping, the tank as a status symbol. And that is exactly what our author is not doing. So let's shift gears to the second type of hobbyist.
Yeah.
The dedicated one, the person who actually, enjoys getting their hands wet. Even for them, the source points to a really common path, and it's almost always a path of expansion.
It's like a universal law in these kinds of hobbies, isn't it? The default progression for the dedicated hobbyist fish keeper is just growth.
It makes sense.
If you're really into it, you learn pretty fast that different jobs need different setups.
Right. You start with your main display tank, maybe a 55-gallon. But then you get a new fish, and you realize, oh, I need a quarantine tank to make sure it's healthy.
Exactly. Then you get interested in breeding, and now you need a nursery tank. Or, more likely, several nursery tanks for the fry to grow out in.
That's the classic pattern the source talks about. One tank often leads to several. You run out of room in that one main tank to do anything specialized.
The pursuit of specialization just demands more space. It mandates growth.
So what's the logical endpoint of that? When the tanks start taking over the living room?
Well, the expansion hits what the source calls a maximum scale, which is when it evolves into a dedicated fish room.
A fish room. Okay, that sounds serious.
And it is. This is a big transition. A fish room isn't about decoration anymore. It's all about utility. We're talking industrial shelving, maybe centralized plumbing, bare-bottom tanks so they're easy to clean.
Like a laboratory.
It's an engine for fish production or study, yeah. Often hidden away in a basement or a garage.
And I guess the next leap from there, if you're really successful, is to monetize it. to turn the passion into a business.
Exactly. The source points out that some hobbyists, once they hit that scale, they end up evolving into a commercial fish store or farm.
Wow.
They go from managing, 20 tanks for fun to hundreds of tanks for revenue. They're dealing with wholesale orders, compliance, all of it. It's the natural endpoint of that growth trajectory.
And that progression from one tank to a fish room to a commercial operation, that's what the hobby usually celebrates as success. You know, you've mastered it, you've scaled it up.
You've conquered it.
Which is what makes our author's choice so compelling. They see that path, they acknowledge it, but they step off the treadmill. They're dedicated, but they actively reject the scale.
They reject the scale because their idea of success is about depth, not volume. They're prioritizing focus over everything else.
And this is where we finally get to the core philosophy that the notes reveal. The real reason for keeping a smaller footprint, for avoiding both the big flashy display and that path of endless expansion.
Right. The author is very clear that they prefer to maintain a small fish area. And this isn't just about, saving on space. It's a deliberate choice.
And that small area has a very specific dual purpose. It moves us completely out of decoration and into, applied science. The area is primarily dedicated to breeding.
And this is the key. The secondary purpose, and maybe the real intellectual driver here, is satisfying curiosity regarding breeding techniques, lifestyle, and available resources.
I love that phrasing.
Me too. Notice the language. It's not about producing quantity. It's about solving problems and learning about the biology. It's the definition of a tank as a living laboratory.
So if your mission is breeding and solving biological puzzles, then your equipment, your fish, everything has to be chosen for utility, not for spectacle.
Precisely. You need tanks that are easy to work with, to observe, to sterilize.
Which would dictate the kind of fish you keep. You're not going to try and meticulously observe the spawning rituals of a giant, fast-swimming arowana that takes up a whole room.
Not a chance. And that brings us to the real distinguishing factor. The author prefers smaller native fish species over the big ornamental types that dominate the trade.
So why smaller native fish? What makes them the perfect subject for this kind of laboratory environment?
I think it comes down to the challenge and the nuance involved. The big commercial fish, like those cichlids, they're often bred by the million. Their breeding cycles are totally understood.
All right, it's a solved problem.
It's a solved problem. But smaller native species, especially ones that are sourced locally or have really complex needs, they present these unique specialized challenges. They might need super soft water or specific leaf litter in the tank or, seasonal temperature drops that you have to recreate by hand.
So by focusing on these smaller species, the hobbyist is basically demanding a higher intellectual challenge from themselves.
A much higher challenge.
Instead of managing a huge volume of water, they're managing a high degree of technical precision, but in smaller volumes.
Absolutely. Think about the logistics. It is so much easier to tweak the pH, the temperature, the hardness in 10 different 10-gallon breeding tanks for 10 different species
than to try and do that in one giant 200-gallon display.
Exactly. The small scale gives you maximum control, maximum manipulation of the parameters, and that's critical if you're doing breeding research.
So the small area isn't a limitation at all. It's a necessary condition for the kind of success they're after. The whole philosophy is intense focus. They're trading visual splendor for microscopic biological insight.
And if we put all that together, the conclusion just makes perfect sense. The pursuit of utility, of study, of the complex breeding of small native fish, it makes a huge, dramatic centerpiece tank. The kind you see in a corporate lobby, completely unnecessary.
The whole metric for success has shifted.
Entirely. It's no longer about how big your tank is or how big your fish are. It's about whether you cracked the code. Did you successfully solve the puzzle of breeding some delicate native species that maybe no one else has? That's where the satisfaction is.
It's the difference between being a consumer of a ready-made thing and being an active participant, an innovator in the process.
Yes. This fish keeper is mastering techniques, they're being resourceful, and they're satisfying this really deep, almost academic curiosity. For them, the small, utility-focused setup is the pinnacle of the hobby because it's demanding in its detail, not in its size.
So what does this all mean for you, for the listener who maybe doesn't even own a fish tank? We started with this paradox, right? The dedicated expert without the biggest toy. And what we found is that maybe the deepest fulfillment in any specialized hobby isn't always about achieving the largest scale or having the flashiest display.
It's a really powerful lesson in how constraints can lead to mastery. If you force yourself to limit your scale to maintain a small fish area, so to speak, you are forced to focus. You have to get efficient. You have to nail the specialized techniques. You have to genuinely understand the biology.
The spectacle of the Arowana gets replaced by the satisfaction of, I don't know, controlling life at a microscopic level.
A much more profound satisfaction, I would argue.
So this raises a bigger question for you, the listener. If you look at your own hobbies, your own interests, whether it's cooking or coding or woodworking, what part of it are you doing for display, for bragging rights, versus what are you doing for genuine, focused, hands-on learning?
It's a great question to ask. I mean, think about how the size of your space or your budget dictates the depth of your study. If you had to scale back your operation, would you be forced to focus on details and parameters you currently just gloss over? Maybe the most ambitious path isn't always the one toward massive expansion. Maybe it's the one toward meticulous contraction.
A lot to think about. Thank you for diving deep with us. We'll catch you next time.